Welcome back to the Geeky Nerdy Techie Podcast. My name's Shane. In today's video, we're going to talk cameras and only cameras. Potentially some lenses, but mostly just cameras. So I hope you enjoy this video. This is all off the cuff. I've got a few cameras down on the desk in front of me here, and we're going to get through some of them, what makes them special, why I still might not buy something that everyone else seems to love, and yeah, just my thoughts about different cameras for different jobs. And I hope you enjoy this video because it may be a long one. I'm not too sure yet, but we'll get stuck into it. Anyway, we're going to start with some of my favorite cameras that I've just enjoyed in terms of the fun factor. And there's two that I've been using a lot for projects on the YouTube channel. And it would also make for arguably the best run and gun video combo. It just would. Now, it is two different systems, so I don't expect everyone to agree with this, but this is just something that I've got in my collection that I think work really well together. So obviously I'm a huge fan of the S9. I've made plenty of videos on this Lumix camera. It's awesome. I love the form factor. It's fun to use, and while it's compromised in terms of some of its feature set, it has arguably one of the best feature sets you could ask for on a camera. It's got great autofocus, better autofocus than the Lumix S5 Mark II and X, which is still a really great camera. But yeah, there's a lot to like about this. The in-body image stabilization is great. It is so much smaller and lighter than the S5 Mark II and X and the new S1 Mark II and S1 Mark II-E. So for travel purposes and just run and gun stuff, this is awesome. I actually just shot a short film using this, shooting like 5.9K on the most part. It was at 16:9 one, and I also used OpenGate a few times so I could reframe it in post. But yeah, it's such an awesome camera, and I think still arguably one of the most underrated cameras out there. These things can take an awesome photo as well. Now, unless you really need a mechanical shutter, you know, I've taken this overseas several times. I've used it interstate. I've used it for just general purpose thumbnails for the YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. And the end result out of this looks really pro. Now, I know there can be some issues with banding and all that kind of stuff. We all know about the issues, but I've never experienced it for my travel purposes, and this has been the most fun camera I've used. I have three Lumix S9 cameras, and I use these in a multi-camera setup anytime I need to shoot outside of the house in controlled conditions, because the sensor is so good, the image quality is great, and the autofocus works better on these cameras in more modes than it does on the S5 Mark II. And if I'm using dummy batteries with these, and I'm shooting 4K, say 25 frames per second, being that I'm in Australia, then it's not a problem. These can just run and run, which is fantastic. I actually did some thermal tests here in the studio with these, and I was able to record until the SD card filled up, which was crazy. So yeah, there's ways around the overheating with these, but I love these cameras. And not only are they great in a multi-camera setup, but they're also awesome for travel work. Another camera that I've been getting into a lot lately, and I had to eat my own words with this because at the time of launch, I grilled this camera, and this is the Sony ZV-E1. This is basically everything that the S9 is. It takes great photos. The video quality is off the charts with this. I think the sensor in here might be slightly better than the one in the S9. It's really beautiful. It shoots 4K 60 uncropped, or 50 if you're in Australia, and we get a dedicated S&Q option, and this can shoot 4K at 120 frames per second with a minor crop with full autofocus support. So for me, the strength of the ZV-E1 is when I don't need to use it for long form recording like this out into an external monitor to make sure I can see my levels and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, I've learned a few things about this camera when it comes to the IBIS. So interestingly enough, if I pair this with, say, a Sony G Master lens or any native Sony lens, the IBIS is actually much better than I thought it was. I was using it a lot with third-party lenses, and I came to realize that the IBIS stunk a lot of the time. Anytime I was doing handheld stuff, I just wasn't able to get very good results out of it. But then I tried it with the G Master 24mm f1.4 lens again. I was like, actually, this is really good. It's not as good as the Lumix. I'm not saying that it is. It doesn't have the boost mode where it kind of like locks it off onto a tripod. So for handheld work, it's definitely not as good as the Lumix system, but when you're shooting 4K 60 or 120 frames per second, you don't really need that level of IBIS. You can just still get a really great image because it's all slowed down 4 or 2 times. So that's really cool. I think this camera is extremely underrated, and in terms of overheating, it's been reliable. When I shot my S1R Mark II review video, when I had the pre-release one, that Lumix camera was overheating with a fan, and this continued to roll in the background. I was really shocked at how reliable this was, even in direct sunlight. So the white camera body definitely makes a difference, and it gets stinking hot here. Anyway, it is what it is. This kind of fills in the gaps of the S9. The S9 kind of fills in the gaps of the ZV-E1, and together, if you're looking for a run and gun travel rig, man, you get the best of both worlds here with these two. I really like them. And, you know, some people will say, oh, you know, the 10 megapixel sensor or whatever the effective megapixels is on this isn't good enough for photography. Well, I disagree. I still think it's good enough. I mean, if you're a pro, obviously get a higher resolution sensor, but the photos out of this are killer, and it's kind of becoming my #1 sort of thumbnail photography camera in here because it does a really great job. One thing I can really appreciate about the ZV-E1 over some of the Lumix cameras, it's not quite as sharp in that sort of artificial way. It has the look of something like the S1H, for example. It really does sort of nail that kind of look where it looks a little bit more filmy or organic or less digitally sharp, whatever you want to call it. It's all up to you. But yeah, I've had an FX3, I've had an A7S3. It's the same sensor as those cameras. And it really astounds me how great the image quality is out of this every time I pick it up, because it looks like a plastic fantastic. But unless you've picked one up, you don't realize that the build quality actually feels a little bit more premium than it does on the S9. So yeah, the buttons and dials all feel a little bit better. We get the clear image zoom here. And again, it's kind of like the same type of camera as the S9, but just fills in the gaps and vice versa. So yeah, as a A-B combo, I'm a big fan of the E1 and the S9 working together. I think it's a really great combo. All right, let's talk about Micro Four Thirds, which I've been using more and more again, because one, I trust the cameras. You know, there's something to be said about being able to let a camera run and never have to worry about it, even when it gets stinking hot outside. And that's where the GH7 has been my #1 outside camera. Now, anytime I'm shooting anything on this YouTube channel, or anytime I need to have something that does everything extremely well. And it's great. You know, maybe it's because I'm getting sick of seeing super blurry backgrounds all the time, and I could be guilty of that right now, but I am getting a bit sick of it. And what I'm starting to appreciate is the Micro Four Thirds look. Now, it's funny when you think, hey, hang on a sec, Micro Four Thirds doesn't look as nice as full frame, but there's something to be said about how these render an image. And one thing I've been doing a lot of lately is pairing it with the 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8 Leica. And this gives you almost a surreal cutout against a background that's not quite as blurry. So it's nice and sharp, but not in a bad way. But it does give you a nice pop from the background in a way where, you know, these subtle things are things I'm starting to notice and appreciate more about Micro Four Thirds. And the fact that 24 to 70 equivalent is this small is unbelievable. And I think this sort of ties into my point earlier about maybe not being as impressed with the S1 Mark II after the fact. Was I have a GH7. It basically does everything that the S1 Mark II does, and it does a few things that are actually better. But there are some limitations to this camera in terms of handling compared to the new camera bodies. You know, whether or not you like this flippy tilty screen sort of mechanism here, that's all up to you. It doesn't feel as robust in the hand as the GH7 screen, which clicks in a whole lot better. So yeah, this just feels a little bit sort of more sturdy. And obviously the active cooling in the GH7 works better, or the camera doesn't have as big of an issue with overheating, most likely there because of the sensor size. But this is so good. It's just a shame we haven't seen as many sort of meaningful firmware updates for the GH7 that came to the S1 Mark II. And if I had to guess, I would almost say now, I don't trust the future of the Lumix Micro Four Thirds cameras. And this isn't to say that they're bad cameras, because I absolutely love them. I still prefer shooting with this over shooting with the S1 Mark II for a few reasons, which we'll get into. But yeah, this GH7 is so underrated. You know, they're currently a lot less expensive on Amazon. I'm looking for a second one of these, and I may offload some other stuff very soon, because as an AB sort of run and gun camera rig, anytime I need small zooms, you can't beat Micro Four Thirds. They're really awesome. It's such a great camera system. It's funny, I posted a photo on my feed saying which one looks better, this or this. It was Micro Four Thirds versus full frame. And I have had equivalent settings and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think most people could tell the difference, and that's the sad reality of it. You know, just yesterday I was out shooting with the GH7 as my behind-the-scenes camera, and the end look paired with this lens is really something special. And yeah, I think the dismissal of the sensor size is just like the most useless argument now when it comes to image quality. You know, I've had an FX30 which has an APS-C sensor, and I still stand by the fact that that's one of the most useful cameras you can buy. There's no overheating. You can let it run all day. It does 4K uncropped 60p, even though it is an APS-C sensor. And it also does 4K 120, and it does it really well. Like, the color science is beautiful. I kind of wish in hindsight I had kept that camera. I actually ended up almost getting scammed from a camera company at one point. I was going to buy a second FX30. I ended up getting my money back, thank God, to PayPal. But yeah, I was going to go down the route of having a multi-camera set up with the FX30s. That's how much I liked them. In the end, I ended up getting something else. I think I got another S5 Mark II. But yeah, it was one of those situations where I thought to myself, you know, all of these sensors are so good, and it depends on your shooting needs and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, Micro Four Thirds won't be as good when you're shooting video in low light, especially once you start cranking up the sensor. But you pair these with a fast lens and keep the ISO within the range that it's its sweet spot, and you're going to still get very good results. The dynamic range on these are also very good. You know, I just shot a comparison between the GH7 and the S1 Mark II, and that'll be up pretty soon. And I tell you what, there's not a lot in it. There's not a lot in it, except for the price. Actually, there's not a lot in it there sometimes either. But yeah, at the moment, you can find the GH7 for a lot less money, at least in Australia, than you can the S1 Mark II. Now, when it comes to this Micro Four Thirds setup, the GH7's been my talk to camera, and I've also just been really enjoying it for lens reviews. Anytime I'm shooting photos or testing lenses, all that kind of stuff. It's just an awesome camera. But the G9 Mark II, man, I still think that this is one of the best cameras Lumix have ever made. It takes the form factor style of the, you know, GH5 camera, but kind of improves on it, in my opinion. Now, some people think that the build quality on this isn't as good as what the GH5 or S cameras were. I kind of agree to some extent. They don't have the rubberized grip here because a lot of those used to peel off after long periods of time on the GH cameras. So I actually prefer now the way that this feels, even though I didn't like it, the card door, as much when I first got it. But this is essentially kind of a S1 Mark II in many ways too, right? So yeah, sure, you can get the G9 Mark II to overheat, but as an actual run and gun tool, I kind of think that this is as good or more powerful than the S1 Mark II, and I'll explain why. So both of these cameras have S and Q modes. The G9 Mark II can allow you to shoot up to 4K at 120 frames per second with autofocus, but without subject detection. Hopefully we get that at some point, but that's a feature that is clearly missing from the S1 Mark II, because it feels to me, after knowing what I know now about cameras and testing them and seeing what comes in the next version, I think 4K 120 S and Q will be saved for the next camera, whatever that is, the S1H Mark II or whatever full frame camera they release. It might be an S5 Mark III, who knows? But yeah, if you like to shoot in the slower frame rates, Micro Four Thirds still gets the win, unless you're shooting indoors where the full frame sensor will look better. But for outside stuff, it doesn't make any difference. I still prefer the functionality win of Micro Four Thirds here. But this is just me. It won't be for everybody. But yeah, the GH7 and G9 Mark II really took Micro Four Thirds to the next level, having 4K at 120 frames per second, and just better sensors overall. Better dynamic range. The color science is nice compared to some of the older cameras. The GH6 has maybe the best color science of all time, but yeah, the Micro Four Thirds system kind of set the standard for a lot of other camera brands, and I still feel that way now. Like, I see releases and I'm like, minus the bad DFD autofocus of days gone by for Panasonic cameras, yeah, it's taken a while for other brands to really match it and surpass it. The most meaningful upgrade I ever made was going from like a GH5S to a Sony FX3. That difference was night and day. Now, there's some trade-offs there as well, as I've spoken about already. There's always trade-offs when you change stuff, but that was a massive improvement in terms of image quality, which kind of brings me to my point. While I'm not a huge fan of the color science on the S1 Mark II compared to the color science on the S5 Mark II and X, the image out of this is beautiful, but there's not that big of a difference unless you're shooting 4K at 120 frames per second, where I see a massive improvement over the S5 Mark II or X. And for the price, I can't necessarily justify the upgrade for me personally. Now, this flippy screen is probably one of the stars of the show if you like working behind the camera like this, but after putting a lot of these cameras back to back, side to side, all that kind of stuff, you know, the image quality out of this for the modes I would use on the S1 Mark II look every bit as good, and you get better autofocus performance in S&Q mode, and you get S&Q up to 4K at 120 frames per second. So I've got to kind of work out whether or not, if I ended up going for the S1 Mark II, whether or not I would actually take full advantage of this, knowing I've already got stuff that works for my particular use case. Now, in a situation where I didn't have a S5 Mark II or an X or a S9 or any of the other cameras, and I was seriously thinking about getting, say, an FX3 or an S1 Mark II, it really comes down to what you value the most. If you don't need open gate and you 4K, you know, up to 100 frames per second is good enough for you, then go for the FX3. But if you want a better handheld run and gun rig, this is where the S1 Mark II really takes the cake. The in-body image stabilization on here is epic. It's so good. It's as good as Micro Four Thirds on the most part. But the the takeaway is this, right? They're all good. They're all good. Not one's better than the other. It all comes down to what your better than the other is, not what my better than the other is, if that makes any sense. So your use case will be different to the next person's use case, and you can make your mind up what is the best thing for you. Now, there's a couple of other reasons why I won't be going for the S1 Mark II over the S5 Mark II X, and I don't think the image quality out of this is really any better. Sure, you get uncropped 4K 60 and 5.9K and all that kind of stuff, but it's just not necessarily that much better for my use case. Now, if you, again, need all those tools, go ahead and get it. But I'm shooting 5.9K here on the S5 Mark II X by accident. I realized I left it on this mode for something else I was shooting. I also find when I shoot on the road, if we're shooting a guitar shop walkthrough video, having that APS-C crop where I don't have to fiddle through the menu system is really handy. I can just switch it to my second custom setting or S&Q, and I'm good to go. The biggest reason to go for the S1 Mark II over the X is if you need those higher frame rates, but I just don't see enough of an image quality like benefit over getting the S5 Mark II X. The S5 Mark II X is bulletproof in the heat. I recently got back from Texas where I had it in direct sunlight. It was like 40 degrees and it just continued to work. I was sweating bullets. I dropped it in the sun a few times right in the middle of grassy fields and so forth, and it just continued to work, where at the time the S1 Mark II it would have shut down. Now, since the firmware upgrade, this is definitely a much better camera for that, but you might remember back when the S1R Mark II was overheating to no end. In my video, I got to test it in summer and I called it out. I said, I won't be buying this because it overheats too often. Since then, there's a new firmware upgrade for that camera as well. I haven't tested it, and to be honest, I'm not really very interested in testing that out. But I was interested in testing out the S1 Mark II again. But I'm more of the opinion, if you put a CF Express card or any kind of card slot in the camera, you shouldn't have to work around that. It should just work. And the list of approved CF Express cards were a mess. It wasn't clear on what was what. And after, running through a whole bunch of stuff through search engines, I found out I did have a CF Express Type B card that was approved. And it gets stinking hot in that camera. Whereas if I use the same card in my GH7, it works without incident. Imagine this, right? Sony released the Sony FX3 Mark II with CF Express A card slots. And then the workaround for it not overheating was to use the antiquated, SD cards. People would be livid. And I don't know why so many people defended the overheating. Work around this, run a dummy battery, do that, do this. It's like, no. And that might work for your use case, but most people who are spending like $5 or $6 at the time it was released don't want to have to work around issues. And for me, that drives me crazy seeing videos like this. Oh, it doesn't overheat on me. It gets to 23 degrees Celsius. It's like, dude, it gets to 40 here and it gets worse in other parts of Australia. Like, what are you talking about? The UV index is off the charts here. You can get burnt in like 20 minutes outside. And these are situations where I don't want to have to work around problems. So it was a hard camera for me to recommend for anyone shooting serious video, as glorious as the image quality looks. I still think image quality wise, that's the best camera in the full frame line. The color science is still subjective, but the overall 8K out of that camera was beautiful. It did have rolling shutter and all that, but for tripod work, it was stunning. It really was. It was a clear upgrade over some of the other full frame cameras in the line. Whereas I don't really feel that way about the S1 Mark II. It feels like a slightly refined S5 Mark II, but not necessarily like a massive leap. Like I felt when I moved from like micro four thirds over to the FX3, or from micro four thirds over the S5 Mark II X. The difference between the X and S5 Mark II over the S1 Mark II doesn't feel as big to me personally. Now, if you need to be shooting RAW and all that kind of stuff, the S1 Mark II is still a really great choice, and I'm not saying it's a bad camera, but I feel like between what I've already invested in and just the oddball camera out, this E1, I can get all the kind of looks I'm going for, whether I'm shooting in the studio or out in the field. I've got cameras that are bulletproof. I don't even have to think about overheating, no matter which media card bay I'm using, and I don't have to work around problems. They just work, and for me, that's important. And it all just comes down to what you enjoy using as well. Now, this camera is great, and again, I wasn't gifted this. It goes back to Panasonic, and it's still a fun camera to use, but I don't really find myself going, wow, this is cool. I feel like I've accomplished something by getting the same results out of a camera with a smaller sensor that's also, this actually feels lighter. I could be wrong, but finally we might have had a micro four thirds camera that's not quite as heavy. But yeah, the build quality on the GH7 just feels more robust to me too, especially this flip out screen. And while it doesn't hinge out, yeah, I actually just kind of prefer using it. It's kind of weird. I've kind of gone full circle. I'm at a point in time now with no matter what comes next from any brand, whether Sony released the FX3 version 2, which that has great IBIS, look out, I think that'll be a killer. But if whether that comes out or not, I'm still able to get very similar results out of what I've already got. A bit of a weird sort of video, but I want to put this together because the more I've actually just been using my stuff and creating things, the less I've been concerned with specs and new things, to the point where I don't think I'll be buying a whole lot of like the latest releases. If I buy an S1 Mark II at some point, it will be because it's, you know, 30% off. And I've sold some stuff off already. So yeah, right now, I don't know. I mean, it's a killer camera. A lot of people online are absolutely loving this, which is understandable coming from other camera systems. It makes a whole lot of sense. And it's a great camera, it really is. I really enjoyed my time with it, but I'm not as inspired to shoot with it as I thought I would be. I've just been having more fun with the G9 Mark II and the GH7, as crazy as that sounds. But yeah, it is what it is. I'll leave you with those thoughts. Let us know what you think. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. And thanks to all the channel members for your support this year. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of the year.